right, thanks so much, John. That was great. So now I am very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Helen Rowe. She is the Associate Director of the Parsons Field Institute, has been involved with the Conservancy for about 8 years now. She actually started as a volunteer with us. She was a research partner and a member of our Science Advisory Committee. And then she started working with the Conservancy for about 6 years. She's a restoration ecologist and helps oversee a lot of the work that we do, but today she is going to give us a little bit of background about our long-term monitoring projects before we jump into those presentations. And Helen, you are muted.
There, and then here, sorry, okay. All right, yes, I got it all ready. Great to see so many people tuned in. I've got a short time, so I'm going to move right into it. So as Tiffany indicated, we have 3 research priorities, and my job today at this session is to sort of introduce our first research priority and tell you a little bit more background about why we focus on this priority. As you may know, we are facing devastating global biodiversity loss. A seminal study in 2015 showed that worldwide, across all species groups of plants and animals, biodiversity is decreasing. And so we're experiencing unprecedented and catastrophic loss of biodiversity, which is largely driven by human impacts. Causes of decline include habitat degradation and habitat loss, pollution, exploitation, and invasive species. And these are exacerbated by climate change. And we do not know right now the extent to which these climate change impacts are going to increase biodiversity declines as we get more into experiencing some of the climate change impacts. One of the things that we can do, important things globally, is to set aside large contiguous spaces of open space. And the preserve is an important piece of that. So the preserve provides a connection between the McDowell Mountains and Tonto National Forest to the north. And because of that, supports so many species. Because species need this large space in order to persist and thrive. The preserve supports over 1,000 species, and so in our drive to protect biodiversity, it's not enough to just protect places. We also need to ensure that those places can continue to support biodiversity. And so we need to continue to protect and possibly restore and conserve, as we'll talk about in section 2 today. And so we need to monitor these species over time and ensure that they are able to continue to thrive. And so one of the elements of the preserve that's also important to note is that it's highly affected by urbanization, both by roads and increased human use of the preserve through recreation. And so through our monitoring programs, it's important to study the impact of those stressors on plants and animals in the preserve. We also, key to our program is engagement of stewards in studying these effects through citizen science, and also being able to share those, what we're learning with the public. So one of the ways that we are able to protect the preserve, as I've said, is through long-term monitoring. And so to do that, we need to understand what resources we have in the preserve. And we have a lot of that work, a really solid foundation of that through our flora and fauna work of understanding the different species in the preserve. And we continually update that. In fact, we just, as John had mentioned, we continue to find new species in the preserve, and we add those to our list. But we also need to look at what are the changes in those populations over time. And so we want to be able to quantify that change and then determine change causes, and then identify management actions and work with the city of Scottsdale to locally to be able to implement management changes that are needed. And so some of our long-term monitoring projects include amphibians, arthropods, bats, birds, butterflies, plant phenology, and our IUCN plant assessments. Many of these species or species groups not only help us to track the trends of those particular species, but they're also sensitive to particular disturbances and can indicate broader changes that may be affecting other species as well. So they're indicators or bioindicators. So for example, amphibians are important for detecting pollution and also drought. Birds for habitat change, they're sensitive to their high quality habitats. Butterflies for climate change and environmental change. And so to sum up this, this priority, what we do is we monitor biodiversity local, because after all biodiversity data is local. And we, so we monitor, and then so that we can detect change and inform effective biodiversity protection and conservation. We compare our data with other data sets in the region so that we can understand the larger picture and not just in isolation, since species move and populations are connected. Initiatives like ours are critical on the global scale for larger analyses and assessments of biodiversity trends that can help inform global biodiversity framework and IPBES, which is an intergovernment science policy platform on biodiversity and ecosystem services. And so I like to think that what we're doing on a local scale can feed all the way to a global scale. Oops. And now I'd like to move into our presentations. And so in this section, we're going to be covering bats, butterflies, arthropods, and you'll see me back for the IUCN assessments. So I will stop sharing my screen and let Tiffany introduce our next speaker. Thank you.